Okay, so Advent of Code 2021. I must admit I already started today, day one, with a colleague at work to try and get him psyched up. So Martin, thanks for the fun this afternoon. Our leaderboard is filling up nicely. If you're on this list and you're joining in for the competition here this year on the private leaderboard for quote-unquote mainframers, please join that Reddit page so we all know who's who. I'll post the link in the description hopefully later on. So let's get started. Even though I already finished it, I'll open up the puzzle here and start our stuff on the ZOS image. So we better get a connection first. That hopefully will work. It should, right? Activate our environment. No typos please. Activate. And at least everything is all set up. As you see, I'm running everything through Visual Studio Code Zoe. But just to get it started first, we will just kick off our framework for this year. It might take a while and then we can open up our our stuff and then kind of show you what's going on. So we're gonna open up this thing here where we already have last year's day one embedded just to see if it all would work, which it did, so that's good. We can run our endpoint that runs a bit of Python. We get a solution that matches the solution in the description of last year's puzzle. So we're just gonna hack this one around to this year, and then the next days we'll start adding to this RESTful API. So I'm gonna stop our server here for a second, and our input file over here, we're gonna just copy that to this year's. So we're gonna just do a copy of input 20.to input 2021 p1 dot just so we don't have all the code page conversion troubles. Quick see if it's all the same. No, they're all the same. So we refresh our VS Code interface, go to this one. I'm gonna just start by first taking our example input, pasting it in there, and let's try and fix our Rex one, right? It's definitely not this description anymore. The way I made this and did the setup is it's gonna execute the Rex file and take the output of the Rex. The Rex has to say solution equals and then the solution, and then that will get parsed back to the API so it shows in our API interface for Swagger. And we better change this and maybe, I don't know, do that later, right? For later. So we can start, we'll save this and we can start our Advent of Code, because it will dynamically reload whenever we make changes, which is also nice. So once this boots up, which it now has done, and we refresh this page, then probably all this text here is gone, right? It now just says for later. We can still try it. That's now obviously reading something else, right? So we are gonna go to our Rex for 2021 we need. So again, because I don't want any troubles with conversion and code page, I am gonna copy that one to Rex's 2021 e1.rex. Maybe we have to refresh it here. It's all the same thing. We're going to make that not read the 2021 file but 2021. Save that here. Maybe start our API up again. So this one is actually reading our new file. Of course this is the old solution that is never going to work, but that doesn't really matter. And in our endpoint for day one part 1 in Rex, we of course have to execute the Rex for 2021. Hammer that save button, then you'll see it here that it detects the change and it restarts. So we'll just refresh this entire page. Now we'll definitely have to get a different answer. It even fails, right? Because it can't find any 2 digits that add up to 2020, which is last year's puzzle to solve. So now we can actually finally start writing the solution to day 1. Again, something we've already done earlier today in Rex, but just to show you how it runs in the setup here. So we still need to parse that input that we're just using the cat function to actually print the file and then store all that output into a stem called file. So we're going to have to iterate through that file and do something else than last year, and that finally brings us to the puzzle for today, which is our submarine that needs to do a sonar sweep, and we get all these digits from the sweep report, and it wants us to find the number of times the depth increases. So it's nicely shown here on this bit here in the puzzle. Right, the first one has of course no change. Then it increases, decreases, and you need to count the amount of measurements that are larger than the previous one. So we definitely need our previous measurement, and then if our file.I, which is the next line in our input file, if that is bigger than previous, then increment equals increments plus 1, which of course means that we need a counter for how many times we're incrementing. That starts at 0. So if it's bigger, it does that. This empty thing might give us troubles. So if first time, if previous equals like that thing, then we do nothing, else do this bit. That's funky. And whatever happens, we're going to have to store our current value into the previous one, so the next iteration of this loop can compare it with the previous one. So then whatever we have done, nonetheless we're going to say previous equals file dot I, and then we're done, I assume. And then as per the setup that I can show later, we have to say solution equals increments. And then once that runs here, it will execute that Rex, and it will look for the word solution equals something. If it finds solution, it's going to take whatever's on the right side of the equal sign and parse that as a result, and we get our solution. So seeing as we're using the, where are we, go away, I think demo P1 Rex, that's this one, right? Seeing as we're using our example input, when we run it hopefully we will get the answer 7. So we're gonna go to our Rex, try it out, execute. Probably not gonna break. We get solution equals 7. So that's pretty nice. Of course we then want to get, I got the solutions already, but we do want to get our puzzle input, which is this humongous file that we are just gonna store in there. We're gonna run our endpoint again, and we get 1692, which I think was the correct answer. And that brings us to now we can do part 2, which I must say was a pretty weird thing to do, but once you get the hang of it, it's alright. So again, I'm just gonna stop our thing here. We're gonna copy our input file. I'm gonna copy the Rex file and then create a new endpoint for the next day or the next part of today and see how that goes. So first some tedious copying that I'll probably skip from future recordings, but we're gonna have to copy our Rexes, and how did I call these things? I don't even remember. 2021 day 1 part 1 to Rexes 2021 day 1 part 2 dot Rex. It looks about right. The input file still remains the same, so we don't need to do anything there, and we might as well just copy our endpoints 20 day 1 part 1 dot Rex day 1 dot I 2 endpoints day 01 part 2 dot Rex dot pi. It's highly confusing. That's my own fault. Alright, then we can start her up again, and we will go to our endpoints. Due to all this coolness in the Python world, we have to import these all in the underscore init.py. But first, of course, we need to make sure that we change the name of our class here to be part 2. And then in our, basically all we need to do is copy and paste this to make it say like that, and hopefully nothing breaks, which we can see at the bottom here when it restarts when we save our changes. I think it kind of looks good. There's a little light bulb there that says unused import. Well, that's correct because we haven't done anything yet, so that's alright. Then the endpoint is there, so now in our main runner, right, we still have to import it, so we're gonna have to also import Rex day 01 part 2. That should solve our non-important issues. Now it's gonna go gray saying, oh, you're not exiting anywhere. That's okay. We're gonna add it to our API. Rex this one. We're going to do that at the endpoints D01 P02 minus Rex. Of course, we're going to add some documentation to it so that our Swagger UI page looks kind of neat. Save and restart. Back to our Swagger UI. Now we should get another Rex endpoint here, hopefully. Yeah, day 1 part 2, where of course we didn't change any of the code, so this is still gonna say the same answer, which was, I forgot, 1692. If it does something else, something's really broken. So we're gonna see and get the same result. That's good. Would be really weird if it was something else. And then we go to our Rex and solve the second part, which was kind of different. Because now you can't do single increments, but you have to look at a 3 measurement sliding window. Well, for us mainframers, we're calling this a 3 measurement rolling sum. You can kind of compare it to a 4-hour rolling average that we all learn to love, sort of. So, we need to read 3, and then at the second one, so it rolls. The example is quite clear. It was a bit weird to get our head around to doing so, on how to make Rex do that trick for us, because you have to read the first line, but then you take the 2 second ones as well, and then you kind of scroll on through to make that work. So what we kind of came up with this afternoon is to basically store these in these buckets, right? Bucket A, B, C, D, E, F, and then more and more and more depending on how many entries that list has. So we definitely need to know how many buckets there are, right? So we're gonna make a little stem list array of buckets that will all initialize to 0. And then we're reading this input, but again we're reading the entire file, but every time we have to take 3 of them. So it also means that once we reach the end of our file around here, right, we have to stop here, because when we take this line and start reading 3 more, we hit the end of file, and that won't be nice for our submarine. So we first have to make sure that we're not 3 out from the end. So we might as well say something along the lines of, if our I needs to be less than whatever amount of records is in our file, -2. So then we need to do something. I'll get rid of this. And we need an end statement for that do there. Keep it nice and clean. So when we do that, we need to take the next one, right? So that our next measurement, which is I plus 1, and we need the one after that, which is I plus 2. That's still not very difficult to do, and that has to go into a new bucket, right? A new index for the bucket. So our new bucket index is the amount of buckets in the bucket list. So that's buckets.0, which initializes at 0, plus 1. That's our new bucket, and in this bucket we are going to store the sum of those 3 measurements, and then shift on through to the next bucket, basically. So the bucket with the new bucket index equals to file.I plus file.n1 plus file.n2. That stores everything in our buckets, and then we need to increment our buckets count, and therefore the value of our next new bucket counter. So buckets.0 equals whatever that new bucket number was. And then by the end of this we have all our data chunked in these A, B, C, D buckets, which here is just bucket.1, bucket.2, but it's the same concept. And then we don't iterate through the input file to get the increment count, but we increment through those buckets and basically do the same thing. So we are going to have to just get the previous value again, just like solution 1, right, for part 1. So we get previous equals, let's start at empty again, I think that's nicer. the amount of increments, it still remembered that, that's so nice. The amount of increments starts off at 0. Now we're going to loop do I equals 1 to the number of buckets. And it's the same kind of trick, right? If the previous equals nothing, then we do nothing, else we do something else. And what do we do? Well, if our bucket's value is bigger than previous, then increments equals increments plus 1. Kind of makes sense. And regardless of what happened, we're still going to have to set that previous to the current one. So previous equals buckets.I. Kinda curious what will happen. Saving that. Unfortunately, because this file is so deep inside the Flask API code, it doesn't detect it as a change, so it won't reload our thing. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't need to reload, it just has to run this. So we can just make sure we refresh our page, run this again, and we still get 1692, which is probably weird because that was our previous answer. So what went wrong? Is it doing, yes, see, we forgot to run part2.rex here. Now we save it and it will do the reload to make sure this has changed. Of course something has changed. Just refresh this page and try it out and execute, and then we get 0. So that is definitely not right, because we need to get something a bit more. So what did we do wrong? Increments, did I make a typo? If buckets.size larger than previous, it kind of looks good. It kind of looks good. Previous empty, increments is 0. No typos. Buckets, buckets, buckets. Input file is the same, so we don't need to change that. That's weird. No, we can always do the weird thing. Always nice to show stuff that breaks. Toss in our little trace, and that's gonna, of course, make this whole Flask interface go bonkers, but who cares? We're gonna get our output here, hopefully. Or not, and then we'll just run it without the Flask wrapper. This isn't looking all too great. Nope, nope, nope. So we cancel this and be gone with it. Rexes, and we are going to 2021 day 1 part 2.rex. Just run it here and see what happens. That's the humongous trace. Don't want that right now. Delete, save. Maybe make this a bit bigger for now. Do it again. It does say 0, so we need to have a very good look at our code, what we have done wrong. Our buckets are initialized to 0. We're reading the correct file, and you know, of course that needs to be less than or equal to -2, or change that to a 3 probably. Let's try it again. We still get 0. That is so weird. File.I, buckets. Oh, here. See? Typos. Everybody loves typos. 1724. That's a lot better. So just for grins, wait for it all to run and show you all my super duper secret debug pin code, which doesn't really matter. And lo and behold, we get 1724, which also was the correct answer here. So that concludes the Rex implementation for day 1, part 1 and 2, in this funky Swagger UI solution driven by Zoe and Visual Studio Code, all still running on ZOS. Just to prove a point, we might have to do a uname to show that we're really running on OS 390. Nah, well, I'm actually running ZOS. I think this shows a bit more. I'm running on my S0W1 system that most of you know and can see is the Z1090, which is the ZPDT. So I'm off to do the Python in this bit, and then maybe not record that because it will take too long. We're already almost half an hour in. I think half of you already quit watching this, but we might want to make sure we get our stuff out there on GitHub. So we're gonna have to add our changed thing. We're gonna have to add some endpoints. Now remember that thing for the imports, git add endpoints j01p, where is it, p1 rex. I might have to think about my naming convention here, that's already annoying me. We have to add this endpoints day01 part 2. Of course we're going to add our input file and our 2 rexes. Excuse me. 2021 star.rex. Git commit that with recorded day1 solved rex, and we'll do the Python afterwards. Git push. That should bring it out there. Might want to have a look see at, I don't know, GitHub. Over here. Yeah, and they're all there. I might want to post this link in the YouTube description too. But as you can see, they're all now there, so happy times.